Hello students, our topic today is endocrine pancreas. The pancreas is a long, slender organ consisting of head, body and tail. It is located below and posterior to the stomach. It primarily consists of exocrine tissue which constitutes 99% of its volume, secreting a variety of digestive enzymes through the duct into duodenum. The endocrine part of pancreas, which accounts for 1% of its volume, consists of cluster of cells known as the islets of Langerhans. They secrete pancreatic hormones into the blood circulation. So this is the picture of pancreatic islet. There are about 1 million islets per pancreas. There are 4 major cell types in the islets. The first is the alpha cells, which constitutes about 20% and they secrete glucagon hormone. Beta cells constitute about 60 to 70% of the islet cells and they secrete insulin. Delta cells constitute about 10% and they secrete somatostatin. And F cells or PP cells which will secrete the pancreatic polypeptide. There exists a paracrine control system in pancreas. That is, the insulin secreted by the beta cells will go and inhibit the secretion of glucagon by alpha cells. Whereas the glucagon secreted by the alpha cells will stimulate the secretion of insulin and somatostatin. But the somatostatin will inhibit the secretion of all the three pancreatic hormones, that is insulin, glucagon and pancreatic polypeptide. We shall see about insulin in detail. Insulin was first discovered by Best and Banting in 1921. This is the structure of insulin. The chemical nature of insulin is a protein hormone. So it consists of 51 amino acids. The amino acids are arranged in the form of 2 polypeptide chains. Polypeptide chain A consisting of 21 amino acids and polypeptide B consisting of 30 amino acids. You can see in the picture there exist 3 disulfide bridges in the insulin molecule. One intra-chain disulfide bridge that exists in the A chain and 2 interchain disulfide bridges that exist between the A chain and the B chain. So insulin is secreted as a pre-pro-insulin which consists of about 108. That is, insulin is synthesized as pre-pro-insulin consisting of 108 amino acids, then which will undergo modification by the Golgi apparatus to form the pro-insulin and finally insulin and C-peptide. So this insulin and C-peptide will be stored inside the granules and they will be secreted into the blood upon stimulation. The C-peptide has no such biological function, but the measurement of C-peptide is a marker of endogenous insulin activity. The insulin gene is present in the chromosome 11. So insulin has its own credit. It is the first hormone whose gene sequence was first identified and is the first hormone which is artificially synthesized by the recombinant DNA technology. How is insulin secreted? So this is a picture of the beta cell. The main stimulant for insulin release is increased blood glucose. So when there is increased blood glucose, the glucose will enter via the GLUT2 transporter. You can see in the left side of the picture, glucose will enter into the beta cells by the glucose will enter into the beta cells via the GLUT2 receptors. On entry into the cell, it will be acted on by the enzyme glucokinase, which will convert it into glucose 6-phosphate and it will be metabolized and it will result in the production of ATP. ATP closes the ATP sensitive potassium channels. These potassium channels will allow normally the potassium to leave out of the cell. So when these channels are closed, what happens? The membrane tends to get depolarized. So the membrane depolarization will open up the voltage gated L-type calcium channels. So once these channels open, the calcium will enter into the cell and it will cause exocytosis of the granules containing the insulin. So normal fasting plasma insulin concentration is 10 to 50 microunits per ml. Basal rate of insulin secretion is 1 to 2 units per hour. How is insulin secretion regulated? There are 3 modes: substrate control, hormonal control and neural control. Substrate control is very important. especially the blood glucose level. So increased blood glucose is the most potent stimulus for insulin secretion. And also amino acids, especially basic amino acids like arginine, leucine and lysine, and fatty acid derivatives like keto acids also will stimulate the insulin secretion from the beta cell. So blood glucose, if we take below 50 milligram per deciliter of blood plasma glucose, the insulin secretion is almost nil. Above 100 milligram per deciliter of plasma glucose, insulin secretion rapidly rises, and at about 300 milligram per deciliter of plasma glucose, maximal insulin secretion occurs. Biphasic insulin secretion. Glucose-stimulated insulin secretion consists of a transient first phase followed by a sustained second phase. The first phase involves the release of the readily releasable pool present already at the cell membrane. They discharge the insulin in response to nutrient and also non-nutrient secretagogues. By contrast, the second phase, that is the slow and sustained phase, is evoked exclusively by the nutrients and involves the mobilization of intracellular granules to the plasma membrane to enable exocytosis. Second is the hormonal control. Incretin effect. So what is incretin? Any gut hormone which under physiological conditions stimulates or contributes to the stimulation of secretion of pancreatic hormones is an incretin. So what is incretin effect? There will be greater insulin secretion when glucose is given orally rather than intravenously. Because when we have food, the gastrointestinal hormones like GIP, gastrin, secretin and CCK will also be released, and they will increase the insulin secretion. So this is called as incretin effect. The other hormones like growth hormone, cortisol and glucagon increase the insulin secretion. Prolonged secretion of these hormones causes burning out of islets and cause insulin deficiency. So you call it as pituitary diabetes or adrenal diabetes. And catecholamines will decrease insulin secretion. Third is the neural control. The sympathetic stimulation via alpha receptor stimulation will decrease the insulin secretion, whereas the vagal stimulation will increase the insulin secretion. Role of cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP increases insulin secretion by increasing the intracellular calcium. I told you calcium will cause exocytosis of the insulin granules. The phosphodiesterase enzyme degrades the cyclic AMP. So phosphodiesterase inhibitors like theophylline and oral hypoglycemic agents like bioguanides, sulfonylurea, they will tend to increase the insulin secretion. How is insulin transported and metabolized? So insulin is a protein hormone, so it is water soluble, it's carried dissolved in plasma, no special transport proteins are required. And it interacts with the cell surface receptors on the target cells, and then it is metabolized by two enzymes. One enzyme in the liver, that is hepatic glutathione insulin transhydrogenase, and second is the insulinase enzyme present in various organs. The half-life of insulin is short, 5 to 10 minutes. What is the mechanism of action of insulin? Insulin receptor, so I told you it's a protein hormone, so it's having cell membrane receptor, and this receptor has the intrinsic tyrosine kinase activity. If you see in the picture, this is the picture of insulin receptor. It consists of 2 alpha and 2 beta subunits. So 2 alpha is the pink color and beta is the blue color. So the receptor has 2 alpha and 2 beta subunits. The alpha unit are present at the outer surface of the membrane. So this is the outer surface. So outer surface of the membrane, and the beta subunits and alpha subunits have the binding site for insulin. The beta subunits are transmembrane and intracellular. They have the intracellular portion will have the intrinsic tyrosine kinase activity. So how insulin acts? The binding of insulin to the alpha subunit activates the tyrosine kinase of the beta subunit, which causes autophosphorylation of the receptor. This in turn causes phosphorylation of various intracellular proteins called insulin receptor substrates, which result in the actions of insulin in the target cell like translocation of glucose transporters to the plasma membrane, activation or deactivation of enzymes of carbohydrate, protein and fat metabolism, modulation of gene expression, and synthesis of enzymes of metabolism. What are the actions of the insulin? The actions of the insulin can be grouped under metabolic effects, effects on ion transport, and role in cell growth and development. So what are the metabolic effects? The main target tissues for insulin are the liver, adipose tissue and skeletal muscle, and it affects the metabolism of carbohydrates, lipids and proteins. Insulin is secreted in the presence of increased blood glucose. So it is a signal of feeding, and it will make the nutrient getting stored for future use. So it is called hormone of abundance or hormone of energy storage, and the actions of the insulin are anabolic in nature. What are the effects on carbohydrate metabolism? So the ultimate effect is it decreases the blood glucose. So how? It increases the cellular uptake of glucose. So but there are some tissues which doesn't require insulin for glucose uptake, like brain, RBC, GIT and kidney tubules. But in the brain, the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus, which is the satiety center, will require insulin for glucose uptake. And second action of the carbohydrate metabolism, it increases the peripheral utilization of glucose, that is increases the glycolysis. It breaks down the glucose to give energy. And also it increases the glycogen synthesis. It decreases gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is production of glucose from amino acids or fatty acids, glycerol, like that. So it will decrease the glycogenolysis, that is breakdown of glycogen. So by all these mechanisms, it will decrease the blood glucose. Fat metabolism, insulin increases the synthesis of triglycerides, decreases lipolysis, increases the uptake of ketone bodies in the muscle. So its effects are lipogenic and anti-ketotic. Protein metabolism, insulin promotes amino acid uptake into the cells, especially in the skeletal muscle, promotes protein synthesis and inhibits protein lysis. Thus, it has anabolic actions. Effects on ion transport, it increases potassium, phosphate and magnesium ions uptake into the cells. So this potassium uptake by the cells due to insulin action is used clinically. So in case of hyperkalemia, that is increased blood potassium ion concentration, one of the treatment is to give insulin and glucose. So when insulin and glucose is given, this potassium will be taken up by the cells, thereby reducing the blood potassium level. Role in cell growth and development, anabolic action of insulin is as important as growth hormone for promotion of normal growth. It will stimulate the synthesis of macromolecules in tissues like bone and cartilage. So next we move on to the hormone glucagon. Glucagon is also a protein hormone. It consists of 29 amino acids. It exists as a single polypeptide chain. It is secreted by the alpha cells of the islets of pancreas. It's also secreted as it is also synthesized as pre-proglucagon, and then it will be converted to proglucagon and glucagon, and it will be stored in the granules and released by exocytosis, transported in plasma as unbound form, and half-life is roughly about 6 minutes, and it's degraded mainly in liver and kidney. How is glucagon secretion regulator? Glucagon secretion is increased by decreased blood glucose, protein meal, cholecystokinin, gastrin and gastric inhibitory peptide, sympathetic stimulation via beta receptors, and hormones like cortisol, acetylcholine and theophylline. Whereas glucagon secretion is decreased by hyperglycemia, free fatty acids and ketone bodies, secretin, alpha adrenergic stimulation, and hormones like insulin and somatostatin. What is the mechanism of action of glucagon hormone? So glucagon is a protein hormone, so it has a cell membrane receptor, and the receptor belongs to G protein coupled receptor family. And the second messenger involved is cyclic AMP. Actions of glucagon. So the main target tissues of the glucagon includes the liver and adipose tissue. It affects the metabolism of carbohydrates and lipids mainly, and it is secreted at times of decreased blood glucose. So it is a signal of fasting, and its actions are mainly catabolic to mobilize the stored fuels for the cell usage. The actions of glucagon includes, so the ultimate effect I told you, it will increase the blood glucose. So it will increase the glycogenolysis in liver, and this is the most immediate and profound effect. It will also decrease the glycogen synthesis. it will increase gluconeogenesis. So this is the slow but more sustained rise in blood glucose is produced by this effect. It can last even for hours or days. And in glucagon is a powerful lipolytic hormone. It promotes ketone bodies formation, increases amino acid uptake by liver for gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis means formation of glucose from lactate, pyruvate, glycerol and amino acids. And other actions of glucagon include calorigenic effect, that is it produces heat, metabolic heat due to increased hepatic deamination of amino acids. For this action it requires glucocorticoids and thyroid hormones. In large doses, glucagon increases the force of contraction of heart via cyclic AMP. Glucagon also stimulates the secretion of growth hormone, insulin and pancreatic somatostatin. So far we have seen about the actions of insulin and glucagon. We shall see how these two hormones interact to maintain the blood glucose at a constant level. So that is glucose homeostasis. So in the upper part of the picture you can see when we take food, so the blood glucose level tends to rise. Blood glucose level tends to rise, which will stimulate the beta cells to produce insulin. So insulin level rises, it will go and act on the liver, adipose tissue and skeletal muscle, and it will tend to decrease the blood glucose back to normal. Whereas if you fast or if you don't take food for longer time, like what happens, the blood glucose tends to decrease. So this decreased blood glucose will stimulate the glucagon cell secretion from the alpha cells. Glucagon rises, it acts on liver and adipose tissue. It will tend to increase the blood glucose back to normal. So not only glucagon, but there are some other hormones which will have hyperglycemic effect. It includes epinephrine. They include epinephrine, glucocorticoids, adrenocorticotropic hormone, growth hormone and thyroxine. So all these 6 hormones are called anti-insulin hormones because insulin is the only hormone which will reduce the blood glucose. That is only hypoglycemic hormone is the insulin, whereas these 6 hormones produce hyperglycemic effect. So all these hormones, they will interact to maintain the blood glucose at a constant level. Insulin-glucagon ratio. Insulin is a hormone of energy storage and glucagon is a hormone of energy release. A balance should be maintained for normal metabolic functions. After a normal balanced diet, the insulin-glucagon ratio will be roughly about 3. That is, insulin is more. After overnight fasting, it tends to decrease to 1 and may decrease as to low as 0.4 after prolonged fasting. So next we move on to the third hormone secreted by the endocrine pancreas, that is somatostatin. It is secreted from D cells of pancreas. It is also secreted in hypothalamus and GIT. It is a protein hormone with 2 forms, one with 14 amino acids and other with 28 amino acids. What are the functions of somatostatin? So mainly it has inhibitory function. It inhibits the secretion of insulin and glucagon. It inhibits the gastrointestinal motility and secretions. It regulates the feedback control of gastric emptying, and is also secreted in hypothalamus, and it have many neuromodulatory functions and in role in memory also. The fourth hormone secreted by the pancreas is the pancreatic polypeptide. It is secreted from the F cells of the pancreas. It's again a polypeptide hormone with the 36 amino acids. It's structurally similar to neuropeptide Y, and it's also secreted in hypothalamus. Secreted in response to food intake. It will inhibit the exocrine pancreatic secretion and it will slow the absorption of food from the GI tract. So we move on to the applied aspects. So what happens to metabolism when insulin or glucagon levels are abnormal? So insulin, when the levels are high, it results in hypoglycemia. When the insulin levels are low, it results in hyperglycemia. Whereas glucagon, the high or the low levels have no significant effect. I have already told you the hyperglycemic effect is produced by some other hormones also. So as such, the abnormal levels of glucagon has no significant effect. So this is the normal blood glucose. The normal blood glucose in the fasting state is 70 to 100 milligram per deciliter. And postprandial, that is 2 hours after meal, it should be less than 140 milligram per deciliter. Whereas in pre-diabetes, that is the persons who are prone to develop diabetes in future, the fasting blood glucose may range from 100 to 125 milligram per deciliter, and postprandial blood sugar may range from 140 to 200 milligram per deciliter. In the diabetic patients, the fasting blood sugar will be more than 125, milligram per deciliter, and postprandial blood sugar more than 200 milligram per deciliter. The venous blood glucose tends to be lower than that of capillary blood glucose because of the tissue extraction of the glucose. Similarly, the whole blood glucose will be less than that of the plasma or the serum glucose because of higher water content in the plasma or the serum. Diabetes mellitus. So it is a metabolic disorder characterized by chronic hyperglycemia, prolonged elevation of blood glucose, and leading to long-term clinical complications. It is caused by insulin deficiency, that is failure to secrete adequate amounts of insulin from the beta cells, and insulin resistance, that is the tissues become insensitive to insulin. So accordingly, diabetes can be classified into two types, type 1 and type 2. So type 1 means there is absolute insulin deficiency that due to loss of beta cell function. Type 2 means that is relative insulin deficiency. Relative insulin deficiency means the other hyperglycemic hormones may be in excess. Or there may be insulin resistance, that is the tissue do not respond to the insulin action. A third type called gestational diabetes, it occurs only during pregnancy. So pregnancy is a diabetogenic state where there is increased levels of hyperglycemic hormones. So that some persons may develop gestational diabetes. So this flowchart shows the metabolic effects of insulin deficiency. So when insulin is deficient, you can see here, there is a reduced uptake of glucose into the cells. So what happens, there is intracellular hypoglycemia but extracellular hyperglycemia. So they describe this as starvation amidst plenty. That is, even though there is a lot of glucose in the blood, the cells can't take up the glucose. So intracellular hyperglycemia will lead to many biochemical actions which will tend to increase the blood glucose, like gluconeogenesis or glucogenesis. So it will by the breakdown of fats and proteins. So they tend to break down the fats and proteins to produce glucose. So breakdown of fats will lead to production of high levels of ketone bodies, leads to diabetic ketoacidosis. The decreased protein synthesis or increased protein breakdown will result in cachexia, weight loss, and lethargy, polyphagia. What is polyphagia? Polyphagia means increased eating. So I told you the satiety center in the hypothalamus will require insulin for the cellular uptake of glucose. So when insulin is not present, the cells will not take up glucose. So they will think there is low blood glucose. So what happens? The person tends to eat more. So that is polyphagia. And decreased protein synthesis also result in decreased gamma globulins. So they are the antibodies. So when there is decreased gamma globulins, there will be susceptibility to infections, impaired wound healing. And if you move on here, there is extracellular hyperglycemia. So what are the effects? Extracellular hyperglycemia leads to increased osmolality of the plasma. So the hyperosmotic plasma will result in dehydration of the cells. The neural tissues will be most affected. It will result in hyperglycemic coma. And also if the blood glucose rises above the renal threshold, so what happens, it begins to appear in urine. So normally it doesn't appear in urine. When it exceeds the renal threshold, glucose appears in urine. You call it as glucoseuria. So the urine osmolality also will increase. So this causes osmotic diuresis. So there is loss of a passage of a large amount of urine. You call it as polyuria. And so there is dehydration. So the person tends to drink more, increased thirst, that is polydipsia. And it will also result in some electrolyte, it may result in electrolyte abnormalities like hypokalemia, hyponatremia. So here if you see, the urine has high osmolality and it has presence of glucose. So this feature differentiates diabetes mellitus from diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus is due to low ADH, antidiuretic hormone, where there is passage of large volume of dilute urine. Whereas here there is a large passage of large volume of urine, whereas the urine osmolality is high. So what are the chronic complications of hyperglycemia? You have microvascular complications and macrovascular complications. Microvascular complications includes the eye disease like that is retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy, and the vessels supplying kidney may be affected. It could result in nephropathy or peripheral nerves resulting in diabetic neuropathy. So macrovascular complications means you have coronary artery disease, stroke, or poor peripheral circulation, especially the lower limbs. So what is the pathophysiology of microvascular complications of diabetes mellitus? The tissues affected mainly are the peripheral nerves, eyes and kidney. So the uptake of glucose into these tissues does not require insulin, and it is determined by the extracellular glucose. So when there is plenty of glucose in the blood, it will enter into these tissues and it will produce many effects which result in cell damage. So you shall see during hyperglycemia there is increased intracellular glucose in these tissues. So the high glucose concentration can promote the non-enzymatic formation of advanced glycosylated end products, that is AGEs, and cause altered protein structure and formation. So that is nothing but increased blood glucose causes the non-enzymatic glycosylation of the cellular proteins, which result in the altered protein structure and function. Then second mechanism is high glucose level increase the flux of sugar molecules through the polyol pathway. So the more sugar will be metabolized by the polyol pathway, which will cause sorbitol accumulation in the cells and osmotic stress and cell damage. So sorbitol is a sugar alcohol which will accumulate within the cell and it will produce cell damage. And the third mechanism is high glucose levels can stimulate the free radical production and reactive oxygen species formation. So it is glycosylated or glycated hemoglobin. It's otherwise called HbA1c. So when glucose is added to the N-terminal valine of the beta chain of the hemoglobin, it results in the formation of HbA1c. So amount of HbA1c correlates with the average blood glucose concentration over the previous 2 to 3 months, because the lifespan of RBC is roughly 3 months. In non-diabetic subjects, the HbA1c is roughly 5% of the total HbA. In diabetic patients, the measurement of HbA1c gives a good indication of blood glucose control. What's the pathophysiology of macrovascular complications of diabetes mellitus? So the underlying pathology is the atherosclerosis. Increased blood glucose, that is chronic elevation of blood glucose, will lead to these mechanisms which results in the atherosclerotic plaque formation. So what are the mechanisms? So chronic blood glucose elevation results in chronic inflammation and injury to the endothelium, subendothelial accumulation of oxidized lipids from LDL particles, that is low density lipoprotein particles, monocyte infiltration of the arterial wall, and differentiation into foam cells. So foam cells are nothing but the lipid laden macrophages, and there will be attraction of T lymphocytes and T cell induced smooth muscle proliferation in the arterial walls and collagen accumulation. So there will be formation of atherosclerotic plaque. And also there will be increased tendency for the platelets to adhere and aggregate. So there will be tendency for hypercoagulability. So it is a treatment of diabetes mellitus. So there is insulin deficiency, means you have to give oral hypoglycemic agents to which will increase the insulin secretion from the beta cells, and when the B cells are exhausted, then ultimately insulin supplementation should be given, insulin therapy should be given. And there are many lifestyle modifications to increase the insulin sensitivity, like exercise and diet changes also. So it is hypoglycemia. So like hypoglycemia means low blood glucose level, usually less than 70 mg per deciliter. So uptake of glucose by glucose dependent tissues not adequate to maintain the tissue function. And CNS, central nervous system is very sensitive. There will be impaired vision, slurred speech, staggered walk, and there may be aggressive mood changes. And if it is hypoglycemia is prolonged and severe, it leads to confusion and coma and death. The hypoglycemia will also elicit stress response, that is release of adrenaline. So the person will be pale and there will be profound sweating, so cold, clammy feet. The treatment of hypoglycemia is glucose infusion. So in this presentation we saw about the structure of endocrine pancreas, the various hormone secretor, the mechanism of secretion of the hormones, regulation of secretion, and the actions and mechanism and actions of insulin and glucagon, and also few applied aspects. Thank you.